Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to March Mystery Madness. This is a venerable BookTube event, 8 years old, put on by Elizabeth at Lizzie Faye Loves Books and a bunch of other co-hosts. I'm a co-host this year, where we talk about murder mysteries, all kinds of murder mysteries. And my own discussion of murder mysteries this time around has been overshadowed by my playing with the idea of writing one for Camp NaNoWriMo, which is coming right up in April. You should all be thinking about Camp NaNoWriMo and what you're going to do in April. It's only a few days away. March Mystery Madness has only a few days left in it. And I have been split when reading murder mysteries this month. I've been reading more of them this month than I usually do. I keep up a steady diet of murder mysteries, but I've been split this month by two preoccupations. One is the technicalities of writing a murder mystery, which seem to me to be more impenetrable and complex the more I think about them, which is probably a good reason to stop thinking about them and just do it. But the other thing is the axes that I've been talking about between detection and authority. What are those axes in your detective story? Does the person who has the authority to do something about the crime also do all of the detecting? Does the person who does all of the detecting not involve themselves with the authority at all? Or is there some sort of combination between the two? I got thinking about those two axes because I read a number of, a greater number than I showed on this channel. I read a number of police procedurals. And the whole point of a police procedural is that the authority is the detection. They solve the crime. They don't want amateurs helping them. They don't want advice of any kind. You'll be arrested or beaten, or both, if you even try it. They are the antithesis of the golden age of the amateur sleuth. They are the antithesis of that. They are the state will solve the crime. And I read a few of those, and they didn't go well. Let's just put it mildly. They didn't really go down well in the 21st century in terms of trusting the state and their exponents, the police, to be fair, much less to be competent. Your own police, if you live in the United States, especially in an urban area of any size at all, your police department has a 30% effectiveness rate at solving violent crime or murder. 30% at most. I don't know if your locale will make those figures public, and I don't know if they'll tell the truth about them, but I guarantee you that it's true. Closure rate, and by closure I mean a solution. Someone who is found to be likely to be the suspect beyond a reasonable doubt, regardless of subsequent court verdicts. Are your cops actually good at their job? The statistics for American society for 300 years have shown that they aren't. So that's problem number one with making those two axes the same, is that you're giving the detective work over to the people who are literally least equipped to do it. And the problem number two with that is all the stuff that we've seen in the 21st century. Now that cops have body cams and dash cams, and now that everyone has a camera on them at all times, we have more visual evidence than we ever have before that police officers often simply prey on the public. Not for any reason, just because they're bored. Just because they're bored or they're sadists or both. They just prey on the public, especially black and brown skinned public. They're, where you don't have to be doing anything illegal. You don't have to be doing anything suspicious. You don't even have to be doing anything at all. You don't have to be outside of your home. You'd still be murdered. And with almost no accountability. I'm happy to see that in the age of dash cams and cell phones, the accountability is creeping up just a bit. We're seeing charges and convictions for these murders that we would not have seen in the mid-20th century. But it still gives you the heebie-jeebies when you're reading a police procedural in which you are supposed to not only trust that the police will follow all of the esoteric clues to the correct conclusion, but that they'll care about the correct conclusion as opposed to whatever makes them feel good. Or I was reading police procedurals that were written decades ago. They were written in the 20th century. I was reading police procedurals in which the cop leans on a suspect. Sure, you don't want to tell me a little more about this. And there is no way to read those scenes in the 21st century with the same kind of visceral glee that the reader would have felt then, that a white reader would have felt then. There's no way to do that anymore. The society has simply changed. And that gave me a bad taste in my mouth for a bunch of March Mystery Madness, so I sort of moved away from that. I moved from the two axes being exactly the same on this end of the spectrum, closer towards somebody else. Is there some other way, some way to take this story out of the hands of actual armed law enforcement and solve the mystery some other way? I spent a lot of time in the last week in the Golden Age with amateur sleuths the police are usually portrayed as bumbling morons or very distant figures who only come in at the end when authority is needed. When really the thing that is necessary to propel the plot of the book for 90% of its length is solving. It's the detection. And we're not even thinking about authority until later on, until the end of the book, until the big conclusion, when, Inspector Wilde is called on the scene or whatnot. I drifted towards a lot of those, and those are really interesting. They're really entertaining. They reinforced my nervousness about my ability to construct a plot along those lines. It just seems mind-bogglingly complex to me to construct a murder mystery plot. And I have known lots of murder mystery authors, including probably 4 or 5 really prolific murder mystery authors, the type who have 2 books a year or 1 book a year for sure. I've known personally probably 4 or 5 of those people, and they weren't exactly Mensa members. So I know there's something about this that I'm not getting. Because they can do it, I can do it. But I was doing that, and then I sort of started drifting around again. The bad taste left my mouth, and I started drifting around again, looking at other ways to marry those two axes, other ways to have them work. I read another Earl Stanley Gardner DA novel where the authority is legal. He's a civil servant, but he's not a cop. He's the DA. He's quasi-friendly with the cops, but he doesn't work in conjunction with them and often keeps information from them and goes out sleuthing on his own and is young enough to make that believable. So that kind of sort of worked. And then for today's book, I went to a series that I love and that once again marries the detection aspect and the authority aspect as completely as they can be married, as completely as possible. I read a Judge Dee mystery. This is the Chinese Bell Murders. And these are a series of historical murder mysteries written by Robert Van Gulik about a real-life figure. Judge Dee was a historical figure in the Tang Dynasty. And in the Ming Dynasty, he had a lot of his adventures written up in popular pot-boiling detective novels. They were very popular at the time. They were very popular well over a century ago. And they remain popular. Judge Dee pastiches proliferated, and they were everywhere. And when Robert Van Gulik encountered that, he wrote up a nonfiction account, The Celebrated Cases of Judge Dee. But he also thought, I can write Judge Dee mysteries myself. I'm steeped in the culture and the history. I can do this myself. And they might be really popular, and they were. This book, The Chinese Bell Murders, came out in 1958. And this is from the late 1970s. The University of Chicago Press brought out a uniform set of all of Judge Dee in these white, blockish mass market paperbacks. You can't really tell. I don't have anything to compare it to here, but it's wider than a normal mass market. And they're kind of cheaply made. You have to be delicate with these things, or they will pop apart on you. I've had the whole set probably 3 times. And every single time that I've had it, I haven't got rid of it to somebody. I haven't mailed it out to somebody. Instead, I've just destroyed them. And they had, once upon a time, probably in the early 70s, maybe, they had normal paperbacks with totally different cover artwork. There weren't the University of Chicago Press. And I don't know if all of those were done, but I had a few of those, and it was a relief to have a paperback of Judge Dee that wasn't going to blow apart like some sort of mini explosive of paper and glue. But Robert Van Gulik wrote all of these up. He wrote up a ton of invented or lightly pastiched adventures of the historical character Judge Dee. And they are wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And they solve the problem of those two axes because Judge Dee this is Tang-era Chinese history when he is a magistrate, which means that he reports to his prefect. But in his own district, he is the law, the living embodiment of the law. It is only him. It is completely dictatorial. So it's not even in some police procedurals, the detection axis and the authority axis are married in the police, but even in a police procedural, even in Ed McBain or Bill Prazzini or whatever, you are still expected to think that they are accountable to the law. That there can be bad cops in Ed McBain, for instance, or in Pranzini, or in Lauren Esselman. There can be bad cops. And the reason that we know that is because the law can catch them. They can break the law. In Judge Dee's world, he is the law. There is no such thing as a bad magistrate. He has total control over everyone. None of the villagers, even the prosperous ones in his district, are going to hear an edict of his and say, well, I demand a recount, or I want to appeal, or anything like this. No, he'll just have them beaten or killed. So, in a way, I avoid the problem there, because this comes down to the character, to the nature, the personality, the ethics of Judge Dee himself, who is a stern, harsh man, but has a ruthless taste for justice. So I was able to put the subject aside here in this novel, if that makes any sense at all. And this novel takes place fairly early in Judge Dee's career. You can find him all over his career in these novels. And I don't think Gulick wrote them in order of Judge Dee's professional advancement. So it really doesn't enter into things at all. You can read any one of these. This is the longest one, I believe. But you can read any one of them and get the sense of what's going on here. And when this novel opens, Judge Dee is moving to his new district. He's become the new magistrate of the Puyang district, and he is leaving. The previous magistrate is leaving. Magistrate Feng is leaving. And there's a dinner, and there are ceremonies, and Judge Dee is brought in, and everyone gets to know there's a new magistrate and whatnot. But they are all obedient to their prefect, and the prefects are all obedient to the emperor. So it's not total anarchy. But one of Judge Dee's regular duties, he moves in with his Sergeant Hung, who's his right-hand man. He moves in with some of the road bandits that he has co-opted into his entourage in much the same way. I read the Book of the Lion earlier this year or late last year. I read a murder mystery called The Book of the Lion about a character in New York who's a rare book dealer. And when he in his murder mysteries, he encounters some woman who's down on her luck, or some knuckle-breaking man who threatens him, but he likes the cut of his jib, thinks he might be honorable, he'll just add them to his household. And Judge Dee has done the same thing. By this point, he has a number of leg breakers in his household, and also 3 wives, who he honors, but they are very much his servants. It is very much the historical period. And Judge Dee, one of his first duties in the Chinese Bell murders is to catch up on all the paperwork of Magistrate Feng, who has left. He was a very thorough magistrate and very honest one, and he has left a mountain of paperwork that Judge Dee has to go through, including cases that have been decided but have not yet been sentenced, where the guilty have not yet been sentenced. And he has Sergeant Hung read to him the reports of one of those cases, which is the central thing of this novel. There's a feckless young candidate for a degree for a place in literature, which is not so much a college degree as a guaranteed lifetime sinecure if you get the job. And literature candidate Wang has been carrying on an illicit affair with Pure Jade, who is the lovely daughter of Butcher Sai. And Butcher Sai has not known this, but his neighbor does know it, knows that the affair is going on. But no one else appears to know. And they have been carrying on this affair, and candidate Wang, poor hapless candidate Wang, says when questioned that his intent was that once he got his place, once he got his position, it was no longer candidate Wang, but literature master Wang, then he would marry Pure Jade. But that his desire overcame his good Buddhist control, and he could not resist having an affair with her at first. But Pure Jade is found raped and murdered, and Judge Feng gets the case. All this is happening before we get to this book, and Judge Feng inspects the locus in quo, and he interrogates Butcher Sai and everyone else. He interrogates candidate Wang, comes to the conclusion that candidate Wang is guilty, that he committed the crime, and recommends that candidate Wang get one of the more severe forms of capital punishment. Some of them were grotesquely severe. And that's it. That's all. And the opening chapters of this book are Sergeant Hung reading that note, or reading that case in detail to Judge Dee late at night, when they should both be in bed. Judge Dee is just a workaholic. And in the very first chapter of the book, or the second chapter, I think, once Judge Dee has heard all the details of that case, he tells Sergeant Hung that candidate Wang is certainly innocent. Which dovetails very well with the decalogue of murder mysteries that we read at the start of March Mystery Madness. We read it at the start of every March Mystery Madness. One of those 10 commandments is that the reader must be in possession of all the information that he needs to solve the crime. He's just not going to do it. There are going to be distractions and red herrings. Some of the things that are very important are going to be downplayed. Some of the things that aren't very important are going to be made to seem very important. The author of the mystery must be engaged in an elaborate 3-card Monty trick. But it should be possible for the reader to solve the mystery. Well, in this novel, Robert Van Gulik takes that to the absolute extreme. Judge Dee has only been in the district for a few hours. He has not gone anywhere. He has not talked to anyone. He has not examined any of the evidence. He's only heard the written report. The written report that Magistrate Feng wrote himself. And Judge Dee says with complete confidence that candidate Wang is innocent. Which means we, as a reader, in Chapter 1, already know everything that we need to know in order to figure it out, at least theoretically. Sergeant Hung is absolutely baffled. What on earth are you saying? It's all very deferential. All of the people in Judge Dee's household defer to him because he can dismiss them at any moment. The wives, the servants, anything. He can dismiss them out into the gutter. He can also kill them at any minute. He is the magistrate. He is the living embodiment of the law. So they don't actually say, "What are you thinking?" to his face, but nevertheless, the reader, I read that section. I read this back in the early 80s. When this series started to become, you started to see it in stores. In fact, University of Chicago Press was so cognizant, I think somebody there was so cognizant of how cheaply these are made, that oftentimes these were shipped wrapped in individual plastic. So that you couldn't, somebody knew that if you left them open, even a few readers in bookstores flipping through them like this would destroy the book. So they wrapped them in plastic. My original set, I bought them one at a time, and they were all wrapped in plastic. But what was I saying? Oh, right. The first time I read this, I was just thrilled. I was just smiling and purring because that's exactly what you want as a murder mystery reader. Murder mystery readers like the sensation that they have all the information they need to solve the crime and can't solve it. I think murder mystery readers like that feeling. That feeling of, I want to kick myself in chapter 18 by saying, I should have noticed that. I think they like that feeling. And I did, certainly. But this time around, I was thinking about the mechanics of writing a book like this. Because that's Robert Van Gulik just flouting. He's flaunting the very elements of story writing that are baffling me right now. He's giving you a written report of this murder and saying it is obvious that this guy did not commit the crime. I read it and I know how the book ends, and I was staring at it thinking, that is the ultimate demonstration of authorly confidence. And Judge Dee, of course, refuses to elaborate. He doesn't say at first what the problem is, what the inconsistency is, what leads him to say, obviously, candidate Wang is innocent. He doesn't hold much admiration for candidate Wang. He meets him to interview him, and it's very harsh with him. It definitely leads candidate Wang to think that he is convicted, that he is going to suffer one of the most horrible forms of the death penalty. Judge Dee certainly doesn't, when Judge Dee interviews him for the first time, he doesn't say, well, I think you're innocent and that my predecessor was wrong. Nothing like that. But he does set his operatives out to start examining things, start making their way around town. Keep in mind, the town is completely new to him. And that's often very important in a Judge Dee mystery, is the long-standing rivalries and bickerings of the characters. Judge Dee has none of that. He is completely fresh to the area, which makes his deduction at the beginning of the book all the more maddening and amazing, is that he doesn't know anything about this place and can still say, this guy is certainly innocent. And his servants go out and about, and they start examining the whole of the Puyang district, this main city. and its outlying farms and districts and whatnot. And they come back and say that it's very well run. Magistrate Fang obviously knew what he was doing, but there's an element that's bothering quite a few of them. It's a temple, the temple of boundless mercy, which once upon a time in living memory was basically running down, basically a ruin. And then it started promising cures for barren women. It started guaranteeing that if they spend the night in the temple and make the right offerings and give the right money, they will conceive. And naturally, all sorts of hanky-panky is suspected at first, but the temple takes all sorts of measures to prove that that this is on the up and up, that this is actually supernatural. And they have a new leader, a stranger who has come to town, who helps to make these promises and to make them into a going business concern. The temple is suddenly very opulent, and the name that he takes on for himself is Spiritual Virtue. That's the name of the character, and none of Judge Dee's assistants, henchmen, whatever you want to call them, none of them trust this temple. They think that something is obviously going wrong there. Something is obviously up there, and that may or may not interest Judge Dee. The magistrate is very much responsible for the morals of his district as well as the laws and the tax revenues of his district. It may or may not interest him, but boy, oh boy, does it interest the reader. Because a murder mystery reader is going to know the minute that is mentioned that it is absolutely crucial to the mystery, even though they seem completely unconnected. So I read with increasing admiration how Robert Van Gulet deploys his plot. There's no other word for it. This is tactical deployment of the plot. And it's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. I love it even more now. I appreciate this even more now. It's really tempting to put this down and simply pick up another Judge Dee mystery. I have a lot of them. But it was really tempting to do that. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to finish out March Mystery Madness with more variety. But I love this. And I loved it all the more this time through because I am more and more technically involved in how you do this. And this is an exaggerated example. In a Georgette Heyer or a Dorothy Sayers mystery of this kind, you would get to chapter 30, and the investigator or the amateur detective or whoever would then say, well, I think it's patently obvious that all of this is wrong, and I know the person that we all think is guilty is actually innocent. But it wouldn't happen in chapter 1. This happens right away in the book. Judge Dee no sooner hears the report than he says it's wrong. So anyway, I'm continuing March Mystery Madness, and my latest book, of course, it's a reread, because the theme of March Mystery Madness this time around is lather, rinse, repeat. I've been concentrating on the repeat part. I've only broken that a couple of times. This is a book that I've already read, and I'm going to finish out the month with rereads, books that I've already read, and we'll see how they dovetail. I don't think, right now I am leaning against writing a murder mystery for Camp NaNoWriMo, which is just a few days away. I have to decide this weekend what I'm going to be writing. I need some preparation for Camp NaNoWriMo. So I don't think it's going to be a murder mystery, but I'm still thinking about it because if I don't do one for Camp NaNoWriMo, I guarantee that I'm going to do one for the next Camp NaNoWriMo in July. I guarantee that I am. I'll just work on it, on the planning and prepping of it that much longer. But we'll see what the next repeat is that I do here as we wind down another year of March Mystery Madness. But I'll wrap this up for now. A strong recommendation. If you have not read a Judge Dee mystery, do yourself a treat and find one. And I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.